Nancy Kinder. I'm the kin facilitator for today. I'm helping organise the day. So if you've got any questions or comments or feedback, do come back to me. It gives me great pleasure to invite Serena to kin. I would have loved that we were in person at our site in Warwick, but sadly that wasn't to be. But hopefully we can share Serena's experience with you via this platform. She is an amazing community expert. She has a wealth of experience from leading and managing one of the biggest and the best care communities for the Alzheimer's Society. Her superpowers have also secured her a slot as a finalist in the Community Industry Awards. So whether you run an online community or perhaps just sit in a KM team, these skills are going to be valuable to you. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Serena to say hello and share her experience with us this afternoon. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I hope everybody can see me and can hear me. So it's lovely to be with you all today. So I'm Serena, I work for Alzheimer's Society, and I'm going to be telling you a little bit more about the art of listening to your community. Just so that you know, I'm going to be popping my video off because we're finding that the experience works slightly better without the video. So I'll be popping away and you'll be hearing me on audio. So hopefully you can still hear me. And I'm going to take us through to the next slide.
And just to say, Serena, I'm going to tackle any questions that come in from the group, and I'll come to you with any questions. So don't worry about looking at that. I'll manage that for you. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. That's awesome. Great. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction on me to start off with. So I'm Serena Snoad. I've been in online community management for 11 years so far. Back in 2008, I moved from a public relations position to build, develop and manage brand community across multiple social media platforms for Blood Cancer UK, a non-profit organisation. And I then moved to Alzheimer's Society, where I have supported and I now manage and oversee the online community team. The community I manage is called Dementia Talking Point, but I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. We're a peer support community, so we are there to support people affected by dementia. We're also a national service, and we're also a key part of the organisation's digital service offer. So over the last 9 years, I've developed specialist experience in peer support non-profit communities, particularly in health. And outside of work, I oversee a community of practice for people running peer support communities at other charities and non-profits. And also on top of that, I organise in-person events for community management professionals in London with Nancy and with another community management professional. And we do that in a voluntary basis for the community management organisation CMX. So back in September 2019, which seems so long ago now, I don't know about you, but thinking about just a few months, seems like a lifetime ago, I was invited to lead a roundtable discussion on managing mental health for the CMX Summit in California. And this year, I was really excited to be selected as a finalist in the Community Industry Awards in the Executive Lead category. And that's because I oversee a 17-person team of volunteers and employees in multiple time zones. So let me tell you a little bit about Dementia Talking Point, which is the community that I manage. Okay, so some information about Talking Point. We support thousands of people with dementia, carers and family members. We were founded in 2003 and we are the largest English language dementia focused online community in the world. Last year we had over 5,600 people join Talking Point. That's a lot of people to listen to. And the community created over 87,000 posts. So that's quite a lot of user content. And in 2019, we published our best member survey results so far. I like to say so far because you can always get better. I think some of you probably have personal experience of dementia. If you don't, it is an isolating and scary condition, and it can dramatically change a person, a marriage, and an entire family. Talking Point provides a place where people can ask questions, share experiences and receive support, often because they can't really get that anywhere else. Discussion topics on our community can range from concerns about diagnosis, living with challenging symptoms, navigating complex health and social care systems, end-of-life care, and dealing with grief and loss. So as part of my role, I've learned that listening is a vital skill in delivering an emotional support service. Over the years, I've received specialist training from Samaritans and the Helplines Partnership, and have trained my own team in the skills of empathic communication. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time with you this afternoon to explain why listening is a vital skill in online community management, and how to sharpen and apply your listening skills if you're in a role where you're overseeing or supporting some form of community. So I'm just going to say a little bit, because some of you have some sort of experience with communities, but some of you might not know much about the role of a community manager. So let me just talk you through kind of what different skills, different aspects of work that a community manager may do. So firstly, a community manager will often manage a dynamic space where a lot of their role will be about minimizing conflict and making that space welcoming and inclusive. So we say dynamic because user-generated content, or users coming together, is always growing and changing. You always got people new joining, you've always got people leaving, you've got lots going on that's not coming from your organization but coming from the people who are part of that community. In terms of minimizing conflicts, people do have differences of opinion, but the aim is you're encouraging learning and you're reducing toxicity and abuse. And in terms of that piece around welcoming and inclusivity, that's to do with the fact that when you join a new place, it can be difficult. It can take courage. And it can be difficult where you're observing that people already know each other and they're already familiar with that space. So a lot of the work that you do as a community manager is to reduce those barriers that might otherwise prevent somebody from being an active member. And in terms of curating and creating content, that's another aspect of community management. And that's about curating content that adds value and delivers impact. You're creating content that appeals to people, that stimulates constructive discussion within your community, that delivers value and has some sort of outcome, either for the community or the organization. You're also curating content from members, and you're doing that to showcase positive learning and get good practice, and to showcase the value of the community. And then we've got the aspect around, and that's specifically two-way trust and connection, and that's trust and connection between the community and the organization in a way that leads to long-term mutual benefit. That fourth area there is around managing reputational risk and handling a wide range of issues in digital timeframes. And so that basically is about protecting your community and your organization by working in a fast-paced and collaborative way, often with very open communication channels where your work is seen by many. And then that last aspect around community management is where you're often overseeing a remote multi-level team. So it's very rare in community that everybody's going to be in the same place all the time. And it's very rare in community that people will be operating in the same type of role or the same level. So there's lots of intersection and overlap that you're kind of mitigating and dealing with as a community manager. So hopefully that makes some sense, and hopefully that's clear on everybody. So I'm just going to be moving through and telling you a little bit about listening and why that's a vital community management skill.
Serena, I'm just going to pause you there for 1 sec and just share what the audience you've got online this afternoon. So you've got a real mixture from Gemma, who looks after 130 communities, some that meet face-to-face, the rest are online.
Wow.
Lots of people with many years experience, from 19 to 30 to all sorts of things. And we're just asking the difference between public serving communities and organisation communities to help people sort of connect to the content that you're sharing. But this, although your focus is online care community, it can be applied to any group or network. So sorry to interrupt you there, but thank you and carry on.
No, that's great.
Hope that gives you a feel for who's listening this afternoon.
That's great. It's really good to have some context. It sounds like there's an awful lot of work going on around connecting people and delivering value for organisations, and also kind of managing multiple communities, which is great. So let's talk a little bit about why listening is a vital community management skill. So something that we learn when we really start looking at meaningful community and what meaningful community is that takes place when people receive a sense of belonging, connection and safety, and they give trust and investment over time. So the slide I've got up is actually from CMX Summit last year, and that's some research that was undertaken by the team that oversee Facebook groups. And so this is something that they established. So community really starts when we bring people together around a topic of shared interests and start to form those relationships. Now, those people could be colleagues. Those people could be different people who are affected by an issue or a cause. They could be customers. And that topic of shared interest could vary. It could be about the work of doing a particular task or a particular role. It could be about a particular issue or health concern. It could be about a product or an organization. So you can see how that bends and flexes depending on the topic and then depending on those people. So when we think about how you manage that dynamic space, we're thinking about why community management is different to other communications disciplines. And I think that there are two ways, in my experience from public relations coming into community, where we can see that difference in community management. So firstly, when you're managing a community, the skills must go beyond managing a communication channel, because community managers are communicating using platforms and tools that enable two-way communication. Secondly, community management isn't solely about delivering a program of content to generate results for an organization. And that's because community managers are delivering that program in a living and dynamic environment alongside the customers, stakeholders, and service users or colleagues. So that's where you see the difference moving beyond those specific shifts around channel management or campaign or program management into that dynamic space. So to succeed in community management, I think the really important skill that you need to learn is that dual skill of meeting the needs of the community and the needs of the organization by building a dynamic space where people connect and form relationships. So there's lots of different kind of nuances going on. So let's think about that role, that dynamic space building role where people are coming together to connect and form relationships, and what that means specifically for community management. So I'm going to talk a little bit about boundary spanning. So we've just heard a little bit about community professionals building that dynamic space where people form relationships. And actually, community managers have a boundary spanning role. So boundary spanning, some of you will be aware of that term. It's been around roughly since the 1950s. I think it came from kind of a research and development sphere, but it's been applied across multiple communication disciplines, including marketing and public relations. So I think it actually applies really well to community management. Because boundary spanning is the work of linking together two groups of people. And in this case, community managers are delivering value for the community and the organizations that they work for. So let's think about how that works in practice. So firstly, we've got this role of community managers who mediate two-way communication between the community and the organization in order to build relationships, foster trust. So a lot of what we were hearing earlier about that maintaining trust and two-way relationships, that's really where we see that boundary spanning coming into force. So in a way, when you're thinking about demonstrating value as a community manager, there are two important things to consider. Firstly, is to demonstrate why the community is a positive investment for the organisation. So if you learn what matters to the organisation and you align the community's activity accordingly, you can show value and positive impact in a tangible way. Secondly, community managers need to demonstrate why the organisation matters to the community. And that's where the listening skills become really important. So by listening to the community and identifying what they need, community managers can align the organisation's messaging and help to give the community reasons to trust and support that organisation to show that they're feeling heard. So let's think a little bit about how we might convince business executives of the value of listening. So, what are the key demonstrable business benefits of listening skills? I think that increase the trust that the community has in your organisation, and so community managers do that by listening skills so the community feels heard. Secondly, is to improve the authenticity of your messaging with your community. So to do this, community managers can apply listening skills to show they're understanding the community and what type of message matters to them. Thirdly, is to improve your organization's ability to meet people's needs. And community managers can approach that by using listening skills to build a healthy two-way communication cycle between your community and the organization. So already I think we can see that by listening well, community managers can undertake their boundary spanning role in order to meet the needs of the community and the organization. So I think now we're going to be moving into a time for questions. So I'm just going to move us on.
I don't think we've got a question just yet. We've got some comments about different platforms and different experiences. Is everyone hearing and following okay? Please ask any challenge or question you have for Serena through the chat and I'll raise it for you. I think the thing that I acknowledged was, or people like this boundary spanning and how that's a vital role for everybody, KM, CM and all that sort of thing. And I just made a comment, I wish I saw it more on a job description. I haven't heard anyone share that. I think what we've all done, though, is had an experience of bad communication. So I don't know if the group want to comment now and when it felt wrong. I know when people are let go or when teams and roles are changing, that's often my experience when there's been the poorest communication. I don't know what everyone else has felt. It might take a couple of minutes.
So I think it'd be really helpful to hear what people think about, recent examples of bad communication, whether it's topical or whether it's personal, whether it's work related. There's all sorts of things that we could potentially bring in, and also think about why that communication went wrong. I've just seen a question here for me about what has been my greatest challenge. Oh, wow. Okay, where do I start? I think maybe if you have to communicate a difficult decision to your community and people aren't necessarily immediately seeing why that decision's been made, I think that's always really difficult when you've got to be kind of the bearer of difficult news, so to speak. I think for me, that's been a big challenge.
Great question, Debbie. Thank you. Spotting that, I almost missed that one. Carry on and I'll come back to you if there's any more.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to move on. I'm just going to I think my recent example of bad communication was just around perhaps the slightly unhelpful shift in government guidelines around coronavirus, where it went from clear to not so clear. Go out, don't go out. Stay in, don't go in. Don't do this. Go to work, don't go to work. What do we do, Boris? Tell us. But anyway, So I don't know if anybody's got anything else along those
Suzanne's
lines.
just
Or...
come in while you were talking. Was when it comes to connecting people in the organisation, what is the role of the community manager to represent the community in the organisation, to help give the other colleagues that sense of investing their time in this, or perhaps just getting recognised? So I don't know, in your experience, do you feel Talking Point is well respected across your whole organisation? What's your experience?
I think so. We've done an awful lot of work on getting buy-in, and that's basically come from cold hard experience. Back when I was building online community in 2008, and the chief exec at the time said, "What's the point of Facebook?" And I was really thinking, but this is where everybody is, and they're talking about blood cancer, and if you don't get there, someone else will, sort of thing.
Giving the wrong information, that's what I always hear.
Oh, yeah. You know. Totally, yeah, especially with health, you really don't want wrong information floating around. But yeah, so there's definitely two aspects to it. One is about being an advocate and a pioneer for the community within the organisation. So I think charities recognise in particular the importance of listening to their beneficiaries, because the whole point of a charity is to deliver charitable purpose. That's why you exist. So you kind of need to listen to people and make sure you're giving them what they need, because otherwise what you're doing. But I think with other organisations, you need to be listening to people, and if your role is to serve them in some way, whether that's through providing information, providing a product, you need to be sure what people are saying and how they're feeling and what they want and what they need, and just see how you as a community manager can help deliver that. And I think as the organisation, you can start to see the value of all those conversations and all that content. And that's really important to raise the profile of that.
Great, thank you. We'll keep the questions coming in because I know there'll be more time to quiz you later. But back to your session. But keep them coming in, guys. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the impact of bad communication. So let's have a little look. I'm just letting the slide load. So I think often I try and start with, when you want to kind of think about how to do something well, you kind of need to think about why bad communication is so bad. So if you think about a time when you've been on the receiving end of bad communication, maybe you've received a message that seems tone deaf, you've not been listened to, the other person has missed the point, or worse, they've patronised you. When you feel that way, you will disengage, trust will be damaged, and you may even walk away from that relationship. In a community setting, that is bad news, particularly for the organisation you work for. It could mean people moving to another organisation to work. It could mean people jumping ship from a project. It could mean losing customers to a competitor. And that can happen a lot of the time with online community management, and where you're not listening and you're not hearing people, or when organisations just aren't responding to the feedback that they're receiving. So let's think a little bit about a word that gets thrown around a lot and that people don't often understand, and that is the word empathy. That seems to be doing a little bit of there seems to be a bit of a trend for empathy at the moment. I'm hoping that it's a trend that lasts, because it's a really important term. And so I'm going to explain why empathy is important when considering about listening and the importance of listening. So as we all know, listening is the first step in good communication. And when you listen well, people are more likely to feel heard. You're more likely to have a message that's relevant to people. People are more likely to engage. So the first thing I'd say is a verb. I know it sounds obvious, but when you think about it, it's really important. You actually have to do it. And I don't think we can underestimate how important it is to listen. But when we think about active listening, I like to think of it more like a muscle. Active listening is something that needs to be regularly exercised. So how do you turn listening into active listening? Well, that happens when you apply empathy. Now, empathy is often dismissed as a soft discipline. It's one of those nice to have fluffy things, but actually it is a really important interpersonal business skill. And that's because once you understand what empathy is, you can understand why it's so important. Empathy drives connection. It unlocks how to understand another person, how to identify what they need, and how to show you understand their point of view. So empathy is not about jumping straight to your own experience. It's not about making judgments or comparisons or telling someone what to do. That will lead to people feeling that they're not an equal part in communication, or that you're moving the focus away from them. Empathy is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So it's about considering the other person, their words and their experiences. And that means you have a laser focus on what they're saying. And you meet the person where they are with their own words. So that's really why empathy is so important. So now we can start to see how we can use empathy and how we can apply listening. So let's focus in for a couple of minutes on listening to one person. So here is my very brief training session on how to listen well to one person. Ordinarily, I do that for at least 2 hours, maybe even half a day, really kind of drill into empathic communication and how to apply it. But here's your couple of minutes potted summary. So imagine you've received an email from a customer. How do you start to sharpen those listening skills and bring their words to life? Start by reading the message aloud as if the person is speaking to you. I don't think there is a better way to hear somebody's words than to do that. And particularly if you're finding it difficult to kind of connect with a message, just to hear it, to imagine that they're speaking to you. Then look carefully at the words they use. In helpline circles, that's known as the textscape. So looking specifically at the words that have been used in that communication. You can consider things like formatting, looking for repeated words, taking note of any questions asked, and considering the strength of the language used. So I think that can tell you an awful lot on how that person is feeling. Then you can read through what you've observed so far. At this point, I'd be thinking of key questions to ask. The first thing is, what's the big thing it seems this person needs? And also, what don't they need? I think those are really important things when you're looking at how you can meet somebody's needs. Then when you're moving into framing your response, start by thinking, how can the community help this person? Or how can the organisation help this person? And also, if we can't help, who can? And that's really important. Another thing to consider is how you can avoid making judgments. Well, I would consider the context or consider other information that they've shared. And I would also make sure not to assume. So don't make assumptions. And if you need to, use open and clarifying questions to make sure you've correctly understood. Then when you're constructing your response, make sure that you reflect back what the person has said. You can use techniques like summarizing, reflecting, and paraphrasing to help with that. Where possible, if you can give the person a way to continue the dialogue, you can do that. You can give options of things that they could do next, or you can give them a point of contact for follow-up questions. So here's how you can see how listening skills can help us to tune into somebody else. Now, it takes a little bit of time and effort to do that well, but if you apply those techniques, you can dramatically improve your listening skills. So now I wanted to speak a little bit about moving away from listening to one person and thinking more about how you listen to your community during a crisis. So I wanted to give you some examples of what we've done for Talking Point and Alzheimer Society to listening to people affected by dementia. So the four main things that we were focusing on when coronavirus crisis started to gain momentum and escalate kind of back in February, we started to notice that people really needed a space to talk about coronavirus COVID-19 and talk about how it was impacting on them. So we created a specific forum on the community to talk about coronavirus. I think it was the 16th of March we created that, and within a couple of days it was in our top 3 most visited parts of the community. And I think it's only recently that's changed. It's been in the top 3 solidly for weeks. Secondly, we were listening to people's concerns. And we did that by making sure that we were reading through the content, identifying themes. And then we did that so that we could highlight those themes to the organisation in order to amplify the voices of the community and to advocate on behalf of people. Thirdly, we then moved into identifying needs. So we did that so that we could see what the community really needed during this time. And then we could provide the latest information and signpost. So we were then able to make sure that the knowledge teams and the digital teams were aware of those needs, that we were sending in updates and temperature checks on how the community was doing, so that aligned with other services that were supporting people. And we were then able to turn those needs and then meet them by providing the latest information in kind of updates, and then also signposting people to the most reliable places for information. And the fourth area where we listened to the community was actually slightly tangential, and it's about handling misinformation. Now, the reason why that's important for a community is that you don't want misinformation hanging around for too long, particularly if it's health misinformation, because that's dangerous and it could hurt people. And so a lot of what we were doing was working out, well, how do we even identify misinformation? How can we, crack down on this? What are we looking for? And how can we keep the community safe? So I did some research and found a model known as SIFT, and that's doing the rounds in digital literacy circles. And there's actually a blog we can send you a link to if you're interested in, just giving you a little bit of information on SIFT and how you apply it. And it's specifically around identifying the sources and contexts of information and double checking. And so by training my team in that SIFT model, they were then able to more comfortably recognize any misinformation on the community, especially around the causes or potential ways of protecting yourself from COVID-19. And then we also shared that SIFT model with the community, and that helped us to help the whole community to identify and handle misinformation. And we saw that more as an education piece. So we were then able to give people the skills so that they could then handle misinformation themselves. And then, obviously you then don't share information, or you don't listen to that information, and that then makes sure that you listen to the correct information. So those are the 4 ways that I listened to my community during the coronavirus crisis. So I was wondering at this point whether anybody else has done any work around listening to their communities, or listening to their organisations, or listening to their teams during the coronavirus crisis. If there's any ways that you may have been applying listening.
I'm just seeing what comes up in the chat. I think that people are finding it very interesting. Sadly, a couple of people have to drop out. I know from my experience with the Thermomix community, the kitchen appliance, we've been supporting them as ingredients and things have not been available, what substitutes or alternatives they could use, but also qualifying that information and knowledge so people aren't making flour out of things that shouldn't, but like chickpeas, and supporting things that are viable and accurate as much as possible. So I think for me it's sort of listening to the community and then elevating the right messages or the accurate messages, so that's what the majority of the community see, and to avoid misinformation. Paul's saying that the SIFT sounds like a really useful approach. It would be great to hear more. You want to share any more about SIFT?
Yeah, great. I'm happy to do that. It's a model that came from the digital literacy work that's happening at Washington State University. And SIFT is basically a kind of an acronym. Basically, it's a 4-step model. I think it's stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace back to the original context. So basically, it just helps you to spot any of that fake news or anything that looks like, oh, this sounds like it should be a miracle cure for an illness, or this sounds like some crazy rumor. or something that apparently happened. And then when you look and you investigate the source, and you then see if there is coverage elsewhere, perhaps from a more reliable or trusted source, and then maybe even trace back that event or those words to the original context, just to sense check. So basically it takes you around the whole kind of like context, kind of like research around a specific event or a specific statement.
And a couple of other ones, Gemma said about learning and sharing what they're doing virtually, what works, what doesn't work, so that others don't make the same mistakes, which is fantastic. And Debbie's asked, how do you make that available? Where do you share that? So maybe Gemma could respond on the chat for that. And then Debbie said she's picked up on team leaders purposefully, difficult for me to say, giving time for their people to check in. So making sure we're doing, hey, how you doing? What's up? I think Richard also says making sure there's time in every meeting to find out how things are going and not rushing straight into the agenda, so that the people in the group can get a chance to share what's going on. I think we'll continue there, because you're going to have a chance to chat in your smaller groups in a moment.
Great, okay, so we're going to move on. Let's think a little bit more about how listening can help in different ways. So we've heard a little bit about how listening well to one person and how that can help. Let's think a little bit about how listening can help to improve your community. So no community is perfect, and there is always room for improvement. I think however long you've been in the community business, you know that. So listening can really help to improve your community. So if you're thinking, how do I start? Well, I'd start by asking for feedback from community members. And then you bring that feedback together to identify themes. So you could do that in a number of different ways. You could directly invite feedback with surveys. You could create open discussions where you can ask questions and facilitate discussion between community members. So you might be thinking, well, what questions might I ask my community? Here are a few that we've asked in the past. Why did you first join the community, and what inspires you to return? What difference has the community made to you? What problems have we solved? Why should someone else join this community, and how will it benefit them? And then if you could change one thing about the community to make it better, what would you change? So I think that shows how you can apply just through a few questions. You get some really great feedback that could help improve a community. So, you know, that's something that we actually do on the Talking Point team regularly. So let me tell you a little bit about our user survey results. So every year we ask Talking Point members for their feedback in our annual user survey, and then we use that feedback so we can improve the community. We started running our survey back in 2010, and actually last year we published our most successful survey results so far. So there are three main areas where we'll ask for feedback. Why our members use Talking Point, what is helpful about the community, and how we can improve. So let me just run you through some key stats. So 92.5% of members agreed or strongly agreed that Talking Point was a helpful source of information about dementia, and that was a 2.5% increase from the previous year. And then second, we asked that question. Actually, let me tell you a little bit about why we asked that. The reason why we asked that question is because we want to demonstrate that the community supports the organizational objective of giving people access to reliable information. So here's how we can evidence that the online community is doing that too. So let's have a look at that second stat. So 92% of our community said they would be likely or very likely to recommend the community to others, and that was a 5% increase from the previous year. This result, for those of you who know, if you've worked in Marcoms, for example, this result is known as a Net Promoter Score, and usually it effectively gauges a customer's overall satisfaction with your product or service, or the customer's loyalty to your brands. And actually, I'm incredibly proud to achieve a Net Promoter Score of over 90%, let alone 92%. So. And then this last one, 93% of people said they got practical tips to help care for someone with dementia. They felt less isolated, they got answers to questions about dementia, they learned more about living with dementia, or they felt better able to cope with their situations as a result of using Talking Point. So you might be wondering why we ask those specific questions. Well, the reason why we ask for the specific ways that Talking Points helped is because we're aligning the benefits of the community with our organisation's service evaluation framework. So these questions are actually questions that are asked in face-to-face services or asked for face-to-face dementia advisors. So we're basically able to directly demonstrate how an online community can deliver the same benefits of an in-person service. And also, it provides another way to show how the online community contributes to the organisation's strategic aims. So yes, there are a number of other questions that we ask, along with, is the community easy to use, or how can we improve? And actually, what we tend to do with the improvement results and the comments that we get is that we then basically plug that into analysis, and then we work out, with this year's round of developments and changes to the community, how can we listen to the community and build on what they've said in terms of how we can improve? So that's how we will then use the feedback. So let's move into thinking about listening to identify needs. And so let me tell you a little bit about that. So if you've got an established community, they're already talking about the problem that your organisation is trying to solve, or the benefit that your product aims to bring. And this means the most helpful way to find out about those issues is to listen to your community. So to do that in an effective way, I'd consider how you can analyse the content of your community. So by analysing the content you already have, you can identify common themes, see what's working well, or identify areas where your organisation could do more. And so here are 3 ways where you could do that. You could do it through data mining or social listening. You could do it through sentiment analysis tools, or you could do it through Google Analytics or Search Console. And so actually we've used data mining, and we've actually supported academic research as well, in order to use the community's content in order to solve problems, identify needs, and also identify information gaps. So yeah, great. I'm just going to take a pause there. Is there anything you needed from me, Nancy? Is that all right?
No, we're going to need to rush on because we want a couple of minutes in the breakout groups. I know, but everyone's really appreciating all this content, but I'd love them to have a short time, even if it's a few minutes.
Great. Okay, let me just move on then quickly. So let me just give you one example of how listening can improve your organisation. Then we do a quick recap. Okay, lovely. So so listening to your community can help improve what your organisation does as well. So we can take that one step further, and if you empower your community, you can transform the way that customer service and ideation take place. So let's think about giffgaff. Some people will know giffgaff. They're a UK mobile phone network run by you for you. Basically, they're seen as a community-led organisation. So they're actually a multiple award-winning community-led organisation, and the community basically has helped to drive that. Like any other customer service community, they were basically set up to help enable members to help one another, so that members could actually answer customer questions. And the community team actually started to engage with members who wanted to learn more and to listen to them more. And then they actually used the members' idea to argue that the community should be run, the company should be run with the community driving content. So they moved from just listening to the community and putting what the community had in place to seeing the community as the real drivers of innovation and ideation in their organisation. And so by doing that, they basically ended up with some pretty fantastic net promoter scores. So I think they ended up with something like 75% net promoter score, and they reduced their customer service load by quite, I think it was like 50%. So some fantastic results there. So yeah, so just to round us up, so moving into thinking about active listening. So like I mentioned earlier, active listening is a muscle, and you have to exercise it regularly. So listening will come naturally to some people, but to others it will feel uncomfortable. So if you're in the business of connecting people, we know how important it is to develop skills to listen and connect with others. So here's how you can do that. So you can, revisit those key listening skills that we mentioned earlier. You can make listening a key learning opportunity for your team, help them sharpen their skills. and then improve that two-way cycle of involving and engaging with your community by using feedback and ideation. So yeah, so that's the key way in terms of how you can start to apply active listening. So we've got a couple of very quick recap slides, so I'm just going to bring this up.
Yeah,
So
don't worry. I'm thinking, Serena, that I'll ask for any questions, because there's some more questions that come up. So rather than breaking out, you take your time finishing your recap, and we'll use the last 10 minutes to ask any further questions that have come up in the chat. So sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. So I'm just going to recap, just going to run you through a few things of what we've heard so far. So that first thing, where I spoke a little bit about the role of the community manager. And so we heard a little bit about the different aspects of community management, and we could see that that community manager role is wide-ranging, and that listening is vital to doing that well. So we were hearing about kind of like minimizing conflict, we were hearing about, you know, fostering trust, we were hearing about, you know, mutual benefit. So that's how we can see that kind of wide-ranging role and how important listening is. And then secondly, listening is the first step in good communication. So we were hearing earlier about the importance of feeling heard to make sure that you are able to engage and respond. And then the third thing here is about community management being a discipline where you bring your community and your organisation together. And we were talking a little bit about boundary spanning. So that whole idea of having a role where you've got one foot in the community and one foot in the organisation, and you're trying to balance and meet mutual needs. And then this next one, I'm just going to move a recap on through to the middle part. We were starting to really kind of hone into why listening matters. So firstly, it's important to increase your community's trust in your organisation. So you demonstrate that you're hearing what the community says, especially during a crisis. Secondly, to improve authenticity of communication, making sure that you're listening to how your community responds to your content, and you're adjusting, and you're making sure that you've got that two-way relationship going, which moves us into building a healthy two-way communication cycle between your community and organisation. Now, community really is about that two-way dynamic space. So it's not just about delivering specific programs of content or managing a channel. It really is about managing a dynamic space. And then the last part of the recap, we're just honing a little bit more on the value of listening. So I'm just going to wait for that to load. Okay. And just a big reminder there that active listening is a muscle. You might not think you're the world's greatest listener, or you might think that empathy or active listening sound really daunting. But actually, if you keep doing it, and if you keep practicing, and you keep working on your skills, it will become more comfortable with practice. So that's the big thing from me. So just to finish off, there's one challenge that I want to leave us with as I finish the talk, and I'm just waiting for that to load now. So hopefully this has been helpful so far. I'm seeing that there's lots of comments going on. So just to remember that meaningful community, it takes place when people receive a sense of belonging, connection and safety, and they give trust and investment over time. Now that's whether it's customers, that's whether it's employees, that's whether it's service users, all of those different principles still apply. And we mentioned earlier that, you know, we all know what good communication feels like. So I want to leave us with a challenge. Can you remember a time where you really felt you were listened to, and that you really felt that you belonged? And think of a difference that that made, and that's why listening matters. So thank you. I think that's it from me.
Well, thank you for all that. There's lots of conversations that have been happening, and I've been listening to the community that are on the call today, and dynamically have changed the format for the last 10 minutes. So we were going to break out to groups, but I think the conversation that's been going on has been more valuable. And to interrupt you, sorry, Serena, a couple of times with those questions.
That's okay. No problem.
But there's a couple more that I just wanted to share. So Judy has described how she's having a daily morning huddle for check-in for business concerns, and then an afternoon cuppa where it's a bit more social and a bit more of a space to chat, which sounds like a really good idea. We've got the isolation station from Sherry Clark, where she's getting live community back from Facebook around the common treasury. I think that is. Michael's been running virtual coffee sessions with groups where they can chat. It's really insightful that you have 1,000 members, and it's really hard to listen and to keep in touch with everyone and to make sure you find out what they need. And Debbie had a question for you, Serena. How do you tackle the data mining task? What did you do there? And then there's a couple more before we close.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The data mining task can come in multiple forms. So one form of data mining we'll do is if people answer a question in our annual survey, and it's a text-based question, it's like a qualitative response, we might use a data mining piece of software in order to try and identify trends and themes. Another thing I've done as well is use like a kind of word cloud aggregator, where if a word has been repeated, it will appear much bigger. So then you can start to see if people have said the same thing, it really kind of leaps out at you visually. Other things you can do is you can manually mine data. So you might use the search function of community and look for specific topics, and then just go through and manually have a look and see kind of what those themes are. Or you might be using a more heavy duty piece of software and go in and really kind of do some proper kind of like hardcore kind of like textual analysis. I think it will really depend on your organisation's different approaches in terms of information governance and where you sit with that. So we have different processes that we use for each different type of data mining. But yeah, so hopefully that's helped.
Yeah, no, Debbie's confirmed that the practical ways to approach the distillation is helpful. Rachel commented really that she finds, it hard listening, but what's harder is actually how to respond. So when you think of all those things that you've described today, you're almost nervous then how to address them sensitively. So I don't know if you've got any advice in outward comms after listening to your community.
Yeah, that's a really good. It's a really good one. I think actually not wanting to get the response wrong is a really good thing because that shows that you're really caring about the outcome. And actually, that's a really good place to start. A lot of community managers, when they start out and they're just told to get messages out and that this is what we need to say, to develop that sort of confidence where you're then saying no, but I need to think about how this is going to land and how people are going to respond is really important. So thinking about what that person is likely to really need, or what that person might not want is really helpful. And now it does come a time when you do have to communicate a difficult decision or a difficult thing, and you might have to say that something to somebody who that might not land very well. But I think it's still really important to think about how you frame it. So say somebody's going through a really difficult time and they might need extra support, but you think they might be resistant to that support. If you think about ways that you could try and help them to see the positive benefit of getting that support, try and think of how to convey why this specific option or why this specific approach is helpful for them. So even in that way, when you're thinking about how to meet their needs, you're doing it in a way where you're really thinking, what does this person really need and what do they really kind of want from us? So hopefully that's helpful. I know it's difficult. With some topics, it's never going to be easy. But thinking about what that person really needs and how you can help convey the impact and the benefits to them is most important.
Yeah, so just taking that time just to even think like that, rather than sometimes we're so busy and we just fire off different things without thinking how it's going to land or what the impact is. Paul's asked, any recommended community tools, any other than brands or platforms that are available? Any other community tools that you found at Talking Point useful?
Yeah, so I think there are lots of different tools you can think about. So you can think about the platform that you actually deliver your community on, and the resources that you use. And then you can think about any kind of like secondary tools that you have. So you might be thinking about specific, multiple person engagement tools. So like, online community platforms. You might be thinking about one-to-one or group communication tools. So you might be thinking about, if you've got a group chat for your volunteers, for example, or group chat for your team, as well as having, you know, the platform where you're delivering your community. You might be thinking about tools that you can use in order to analyze the information or analyze the content. So there's lots of different things. I think it really does depend on what you need and what your requirements are.
Great. And there's been a couple of reflections that actually taking the conversations offline, so away from the platform, could be really helpful to understand and listen. And then contrary to that, taking Julie's described Twitter-themed chat hours have worked really well to able to answer a series of questions and then go back over the content, even when there's multiple contributions all at the same time. I don't know if you can hear the thunder and lightning that I'm currently experiencing.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you can hear that. I'm waiting to be to disappear. I think without I think there's probably all the questions we can take this afternoon, but I've just moved your slides on, Serena, because I really want them to reach out to you and continue the conversations. Serena has got a great blog. There's loads of knowledge on there about empathetic communications and how we can all do this more in every angle of our lives. So thank you, Serena, for preparing and sharing that with us today. Thank you, Kin members and guests, for joining us this afternoon. And we're going to have a short pause now and then start again with our final session of the day with Rosemary Nunn at 3:30, where we're begin talking about crowdsourcing for innovation and how we can enable our communities to support that innovation. Serena, thank you so much. The connection's lasted, and we've heard from you brilliantly this afternoon. There's lots of thanks on the chat, which we'll share with you afterwards. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in about 30 minutes.